Yes, I'm having a fight with my cat. How funny was that? Well, I know you heard all of that, but my cat just freaked the fuck out when I was trying to turn on my microphone. So, yay! I know none of y'all are expecting me to go live today, but I'm slowly working my way up into doing this kind of live broadcast from the Rote channel. Um, I'm going to do it on Wednesdays and Fridays at 6 p.m. Pacific US time. I'm in California. So from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., roughly 2 hours. Sometimes it'll be less, sometimes I may go over, but the goal is around 2 hours. Um, I have several things lined up that I want to talk about. First and foremost, I do want to um, comment on what had going on in the channel for Rote Podcast. Our release schedule for the interview episodes have been going pretty regularly, so I'm not too worried about those. However, the editing for the reactions and that kind of stuff has been slow to come. And the reason why, for a good portion of it, up until recently, was that I had an older computer and it just took forever for things to render out. I now rather either it was one of the best decisions I've ever made, or it'll be one of the stupidest decisions I've ever made. I actually went and got a new Mac Studio, M4 Mac Studio, which is much faster. It's now allowing me to do more live things like this. But I just wanted to have a way to be able to do this kind of stuff so I can be more in contact with our audience, our subscribers. So I'm broadcasting this not only on YouTube, but also on our Twitch Rote podcast channel. So if you have Twitch, you can go there and do it there. Just look for Rote Podcast. And eventually I'll have the links here so you can find us. But I am also broadcasting this on my personal channel, which is SA Baz Collins. So that is up there as well. This stream is going there. And it is also going to our Rote podcast channel, which we've now crossed over into the 1,000 subscribers. So yay, making progress. So this is another cast in that direction. So, aside from my cat attack, which you all had the benefit of hearing, yay, wonderful. I need to figure out how to turn that off on the count in. Anywho, I kind of wanted to cover what we do here at Rote Podcast. It originally started with the three of us. There was two gay guys and a straight woman who wrote queer fiction, queer romance, kind of erotica romance. And she was based in England. And it actually started out where she and I would have these back and forth emails about what it was like to write in queer fiction. And her from being a straight woman, and one of her characters just happened to be gay, and that's how she fell into it. She was actually writing a lot of straight erotica at that point. Anyways, we got to talking about it, and then we kind of ran into this guy on one of the author group chat areas on Facebook, as one does, and we ran into Van Sebastian, who had just released a book himself, and it's a great book. I hope one day he finishes the whole episodic version of the story he's telling, because it's really very clever. But it's out and it's called Slumber Scythe. I have a number of my books. Eventually I'll put them here on the wall so you can kind of see what I have available. But if you go to Nine Star Press and look up S.A. Collins, you'll find my books there. I tend to write about queer characters, but from a perception base. So I tend to want to really kind of, how do I put it? I want to kind of do it so that I'm really talking about how people in their everyday lives allow perceptions that they have about their life experiences, the experiences of others, and how they filter every decision they make based upon those perceptions. So a lot of my stories deal with that. And it's because I find it very fascinating. That's something that governs a lot of what we do in life. We give it very little due. So I kind of want to have that discussion at some point on this channel. But tonight, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cover, first of all, what we have going on at Row, what's been going on lately. I'll give you guys the quick rundown of who we've had on. So as of late, we had last week we had, which was just released on Friday, Margaret Gardner, who is a writer for the Golden Globes, which just happened recently. Um, she is a writer for them. She is also a former Miss Universe, and very, very interesting conversation. She wrote a really great story about a supermodel who kind of exposes the darker side of what supermodeling can be like. And her character falls in love with another woman who also comes from that world, and together they kind of try to find their way through this darker side of the business. So, great story, great conversation. Definitely should check that out. Before her, we had Del Blackwater, who wrote a really interesting story about called Dead Egyptians that deals with her, actually as a writer, her love and her Egyptology background that she has academically, and she is writing about that in a historical kind of adventure slash romance kind of thing, and it has a queer character at its center. So definitely should check out that interview if you're so inclined for a story like that. Prior to that, we had Scott Terry. He had a really interesting story to tell called The Gift, and it is a rural story about a gay man who deals with internalized homophobia as well as within the rural community, and how he's shut himself off because he was a raised as a Jehovah's Witness, and all of the trials and tribulations that come with that, and all the built-in homophobia and things that his character has to deal with. So very, very interesting take, dealing with the religiosity and the extremism that Jehovah's Witness brings. And if you are ever interested in finding out more about that religion, I highly suggest you go check out Owen's Fireside Chat. Great, great channel. This kid comes from the Jehovah Witness community. He left it. He has very, very strong opinions about what damage that religion has done to the members of its society. He is very forthright. He often seeks out other religion and the perpetrators of power plays, rather than it being about any kind of spirituality. It's often about power plays and suppression and oppression of peoples. And he calls that out, and he has an enormous wealth of a lot of samples that and videos and things he can show you to demonstrate and walk you through as a layperson who may not know a lot about these religious structures, how all of this works together, and how it really is kind of a mind fuck that these people go through, in the aim of saying that they are closer to God, and yet because humans are involved, we know that that's not always the case. So definitely should check him out. But getting back to Scott Terry's book, The Gift, it was a very interesting conversation because I had some very pointed thoughts about it, and we kind of got into the weeds a little bit about queer life and the religious community. And so definitely should check out that interview, and check out his book. And again, I do want to reiterate that we at Rote want to promote the publishers themselves and not cite Amazon when we don't have to. If the publisher has a website, we really try to push our listeners and our viewers to go and actually purchase directly from the publishers, as opposed to buying it through a conglomerate like Amazon. So there's that. So definitely should check out what's going on there. Let me see what's coming up, and I can give you guys a little rundown of who's coming up. Let me check our calendar, our booking calendar. If you are a queer content creator and you want to appear on our show, we built an entire show around you. All that we say is that the content has to be primarily for the queer community. It can be tangentially. In other words, you could write a story about a straight character, but maybe they have a cohort who's a drag queen, or, so it has to have some sort of connection to the queer community and be relevant to the queer community at large. That's the only criteria. Anything that you do, whether it be activism, whether it be politics, whether it be, which I guess is activism to a degree, but or like, any one of the classic traditional arts, painting, sculpting, that kind of thing, or graphic arts, or, writing stories, writing plays. We've had playwrights on, we've had screenwriters on, we've had full production companies come and talk to us about what they did for their queer content. So definitely should check it out. And if, like I said, if you're a queer content creator, signing up is free. I just want to make notice out there that we do book way out in advance, especially now because we have kind of hit the radar for a lot of publicists who are now starting to cycle in and pushing people our direction. So, we have quite a few people. We're booked out. I'm looking at the calendar now. We're booked pretty solid through the end of the year. We're now booking in January of 2026. So if you have a date that's coming up and you really would like to a release date and you want to book a show around that, there's two ways you can do it. One, you can just go out and grab a date that is available and then send us a separate email, which you'll get from an email we kick out once you sign up and choose a date. We send out an automatic email to you so you have a reply place to reply back to us. You can write back to us and just say, hey, if you get a cancellation, someone can't make it on the date they booked, please consider me as a replacement. And those are kind of like, cross your fingers and hope for the best. But, it has happened from time to time. So you can definitely let us know that you would like to be on that waiting list if you would like to be pushed forward in the schedule. So, but we are booked to the end of December. Actually, we have two dates available in December. I'm sorry. We're booked through the mid of December. We have December 19th or 20th and or the 26th and the 27th. Both those dates are available. They're during the Christmas season. So if you've got a release coming out around that time or something that you want to promote, maybe an event you're doing, for the queer community at large, then sign up for one of those dates. And even if it's before it's released, we can do it as a pre-order or a pre-sale or a pre-event kind of promotion. So, there's ways we can work with you to get that to happen. To book your appointed show with us, just go to ropepodcast.com/booking and the application is there. You just pick your date, fill out the form, send it off, and it starts the whole automated process rolling. You'll get an automatic letter from us saying what we've received from you, what our proposed schedule is, and we kind of go from there. And if you have a publicist, have your publicist fill it out, and then we'll work with them directly in the case that that's your scenario and you have someone who's managing that all of your socials for you. So that's Rope Podcast. What's coming up on? Let's see. This next episode that we're recording is from Sophie Hayter, and she is at sophiehayter.com. She is written a book called Dova, Land Within by Sophie Hayter, launching November 28th. So this is a pre-order. It's a gripping tale of courage, betrayal, and unyielding power of hope that will captivate its readers. Romantic fantasy meets epic fantasy in this new spellbinding saga. So sounds interesting. If you're into queer sci-fi or fantasy, definitely should check that one out when it comes out. Jonathan Lerner follows her. He is actually here to promote a memoir, Performance Anxiety, The Headlong Adolescence of a Mid-Century Kid. Sounds like it could be very interesting. This is a gay teen before Stonewall. So for all of the gay history buffs out there, this might be one you want to kind of hone in on and watch when it gets released. And then to round out the month, we have, let's see, Jay Wayward. Oh, wait, no, that's June. Sorry, I'm ahead of myself. Okay, here we go. Robert Rash, who is a coming-of-age debut novel, The Summer Between, set in and around 1978 Manhattan. So another kind of queer history kind of story. So definitely should keep those on your appointment calendar if you're so inclined to pick up a book in any one of those areas. Definitely want to catch those when they release. They usually release on the Friday or Saturday after we do the recording. So in Sophie Hayter's case, we're recording it on the 17th. So it will come out the following Friday in audio. And I usually try to get the video one to fly on the same release time. But sometimes, depending upon any number of circumstances with YouTube and its algorithm, sometimes it doesn't release until Saturday. So it's usually that Friday or Saturday when the YouTube version is out. But the corresponding link for both the audio and the video will be on our website at rebroadcast.com. Just go under the header. After the header, you get to the main page. Underneath it are the list of recent guests, and you can kind of go to their page and select whether you want to watch the video or do the audio version of it. So definitely should check those out. And as I say, if you are a queer content creator or an ally who makes queer content, definitely think about signing up for your own episode. We build it all around you, and we talk about why you're passionate about what you do and why you're doing it. So what could be better than that? And it costs you nothing, just a bit of your time and a bit of your energy to promote yourself. And for a lot of authors who are introverts, it's hard for them to often promote themselves. So this is an easy way because you can say, hey, these guys over here at Rope Podcast invited me to be on their show. And it kind of takes the pressure off you saying, hey, buy my book or buy my record or my song or whatever. You can kind of just say, hey, these guys invited me to come talk about what I do. Give it a listen and see if you like what we're talking about, you know. So it's a good way to do self promotion without it sounding like a shameless plug. You know what I mean? So that's what's coming up in the next few weeks. From the reactions that we have going up, as I said, I got a new computer, so now things are starting to edit much faster. I'm going to be playing catch up. Right now, I'm trying to get everything up on Patreon. So if you have liked some of our reactions but want to see the full versions, you can buy full movie reactions for $5 a pop, or you can get individual episodes from the series that we're reacting to. And I think we have, let's see, Heartstopper, Interview with a Vampire. Um, we have Dead Boys. We have One Day at a Time, Grace and Frankie, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Trying to think of some of the other ones. We're doing Man in the High Castle now. Penny Dreadful, The City of Angels, the one that actually deals with the Los Angeles Zoot Suit riots. And I started with that one because my co-reactor to our reactions is from Mexico. He is a gay man who is a gay author who's actually been on our show several times, but he is now a co-host on the reactions that we do. And he kind of knows there's a lot of queer stuff out there, but he doesn't really know what to look for. So it's kind of nice because I have a huge queer library of film and TV series at my disposal. So we randomly pick things and put them up on our YouTube channel. I will be posting, hopefully, the first full week of a given month, the poll for people to vote on what our movie of the month will be. So we do 3 weeks of episodic recordings for the series that we're currently doing that we all have on our books. But then on the final Friday, it is a movie. Now, last month I didn't do it because I already picked out the movie. We did a full reaction to it. It is actually going to go up on Patreon shortly after I get done with this broadcast. And you will see the next reaction, full movie reaction up there will be for the War on Disco / Disco's Revenge. And it really is something that Albert really enjoyed because it gave him a lot of context in queer history of how and why disco music and the queer experience are so innately tied, and how it all was part and parcel of how the community grew and became much more firm in its strive for representation, for our rights and our ability to love who we love, and how music played a factor in all of that. So, okay, I'm just activated my Siri. I don't know why. This thing listens to me more than it should. But that is kind of what's going on with the whole reaction scenario. I am now playing catch up. I'm going to be getting them out a lot sooner. So I've got several movies I've got to catch up on. Almost everything is on Patreon. Like I said, you can buy individual reactions for $5 or for the individual episodes of series for $3 a pop. When we get done with the complete show, like Interview with a Vampire, I'm going to kind of create you can buy the whole collection under at a reduced price rather than $3. I'll give it to you at a reduced price if you buy the whole lot. And so that's another way to help us keep the lights on. There are costs involved, obviously, because I bought a new computer and stuff. There are costs involved for the production that we do here. We have server costs and all kinds of things that we pay out of our own pocket. And what we're trying to do here is become a repository of queer content, so that if you're looking for a new book, a new beach read, if you want to find some new movie or TV show to watch and don't know whether it's any good or not, you can definitely come to Wrote Podcast, youtube.com/@Wrote and check out our reviews, our reactions, our interviews with queer content creators. So we are trying to really build this repository for people to use to find their next queer media purchases. So it's our way of not only documenting this from a historical standpoint, and we've been doing this for 10 years. This is our 10th season. We actually crossed the threshold in our 10th year on April 15th last month. So we are now officially 10 years of weekly releases. So we've got well over, I think, 700 episodes now in the can. So definitely should check that out. Seasons 1 through 6.5, 7 are all audio, and you can find them at any podcast distribution point like Apple Podcasts or Spotify or iHeartRadio. So there are the usual podcast distribution points. You can go to any one of those platforms and search for Wrote Podcast, and we'll be there. So you can do that. Or if you want to start watching them from the video standpoint where we do them, then that happens I think it was mid-season 7. We've got over 100 and so episodes that are up there that you can comb through. We have NB writers, we have lesbian, trans women, trans men, we have gay men authors, we have straight allies from across the spectrum that have written and produce some works for our community. So it's, there's a lot there to choose from. So definitely should check that out. I highly recommend it. Now, I do have some things I want to react to, and I'm going to switch now to that. And the first one I want to talk about is actually from Hassan Piker. And the reason why I kind of want to react to this is, as queer people, we know that we're prone to be rounded up in an authoritarian society. History has shown that time and time again. So let's be clear that the time for throwing shade at each other and belittling each other, children, we need to put that down. We need to stop doing that. Save your shade for those that are against us, because believe me, they're out there and they're coming for us. So I'm not wanting to be hyperbolic here. I'm trying to be very, very realistic. I lived through the AIDS crisis. I lived through the gay rights movement. I know how hard you have to work to maintain these things. You children out there, as Brother Porter likes to say, the children out there have only known what we have now. They have not experienced, you have not experienced what it was like before. Take it from your elders and pay heed to what we're saying. Definitely pay attention to what's going on here, okay? I will say that Hassan I tend to watch his channel off and on. I'm not a regular audience member, but fairly regularly. If I see a topic he's covering and I find it very interesting, I'll chime in and see what he has to say about it. My politics align with his pretty closely, so I'm also very queer militant in that I don't have time for straight people bullshit anymore. Now that I'm entering my 6th decade on this planet, I ain't got time for straight people bullshit anymore. I've got to be concentrated on my queer community and make sure the children have a place where they can be protected and safe. So I'm putting all my efforts into keeping informed, keeping things moving forward, and then throwing our rote podcast, our little podcast voice into the din and trying to generate some engagement and some conversation to let people know that what's out there, what's a situation that we all need to be worried about and what we need to pay attention to. Now, Hassan recently came back from a family vacation from Paris, France, and he arrived back in, I think he went to Chicago because he had a conference to go to and speak at. And he landed in O'Hare Airport in Chicago, and he was flagged for detainment. So they pulled him aside and they held him for a couple of hours. And he recounted the full episode of that in a much longer video that I'm not going to comment or react to here. What I am going to play is the fallout from it the day after, where he is claiming what everyone got wrong about his detainment. So I'd like to react to that. I haven't watched it, so this is going to be kind of new for me as well. So we'll see what he has to say about it. But I think it's something that you need to bear in mind that we all need to pay attention to. Even if you are a U.S. citizen, Hassan is a U.S. citizen. He was born in America. So this is an American who went through this whole bullshit. So take heed, kids. Pay attention. Listen to what the man has to say. Okay, here we go with it. This is Hassan Piker commenting on what everyone got wrong about my detainment.
A lot of people online just simply don't understand what the First Amendment looks like and what it's supposed to be used for. It's this. This is what it's supposed to be used for. It's a restriction on the government, okay? It's not a restriction on you. The First Amendment is not about private corporations refusing to ban you because you said slurs. It's this. This is literally what it's there for. This is the exact reason for why it exists, okay? It is not a restriction on the citizens. It is a restriction on the government from engaging in displays of power against the citizens. There's a lot of commentary, a lot of back and forth happening on this stuff, and there's been a lot of news coverage on it as well. And virtually every single outlet has reached out at this point to get my insight into what took place. With the limited amount of spare time that I have, I tried to use that to the best of my ability and respond to questions and things like that. But overall, there was, of course, a lot of support from liberals who were terrified of the things that are unfolding. A lot of articles were written about it from virtually every single major news publication wrote about it. Here's the New York Times. On Hassan Piker, popular left-wing streamer, says he was detained at airport. Mr. Piker said he was questioned for 2 hours on topics including the war in Gaza and President Trump. Popular Turkish-American online streamer said he was stopped and questioned for hours about his political beliefs by U.S. Customs and Border Protection after flying back in the United States from overseas on Sunday. Mr. Piker, 33, said in a live broadcast on Monday that he was asked about his job, his beliefs on Gaza and the President Trump, and other topics he discussed on his live stream while being held for 2 hours at an airport in Chicago. Mr. Piker, who was born in the United States, said he was passing through global entry and a U.S. Customs and Border Protection program that eases security checks for travelers deemed to be low risk when an agent asked him to step aside. According to Piker, a U.S. Immigration Customs Enforcement agent led him to an area he described as a detention center where he was taken into a room for questioning. It's very obvious they knew who I was, Mr. Piker said, using an expletive. He has about 4.5 million followers combined on YouTube, Twitch, Tricia McLaughlin, a spokesman for the Department of Homeland Security, said in a statement on social media that Mr. Piker's claims that his political beliefs triggered the inspection are baseless. Upon entering the country, this individual was referred for further inspection, a routine lawful process that occurs daily and can apply for any traveler, she said. Once his inspection was complete, he was promptly released. I found this to be a very funny response, and the reason why I think it's really funny is because, first and foremost, they admit to it happening. They openly admit to it taking place. Saying that I'm lying for likes is very funny. They don't even deny that it took place, okay? They simply deny that it was a political targeting. And I think it's important. I think it's important to take note of what the Department of Homeland Security is taking issue with here. What the Department of Homeland Security is taking issue with here is political beliefs being triggered for the inspection. That's important to take note of because it shows you what the admin is worried about. Because if they were not worried about anything, they would have just been like, you know, he is a figure of notoriety that we pulled a red flag on. Because they openly admit that the detention happened. They openly admit that the investigation took place. They're worried about the backlash that they might receive given that this is perceived as a political targeting. To which I responded with, by the way, in the NBC article, what part of a lawful routine inspection requires the DHS to question me about my political views, my opinions on Donald Trump, or my stance on Israel and Palestine? The agent was cordial, but the experience, along with reports of other Americans Americans facing similar questioning seems intended to create a chilling effect on speech. As a taxpayer, I believe CBP agents should be focusing on actual threats like preventing agricultural risks or combating trafficking, not interrogating people about their political beliefs. As I said, the DHS response is so funny because they're not even disputing that it happened. They're omitting the insane questions that were asked and instead claiming that I wasn't targeted for my political beliefs. Why'd y'all ask me about Trump, Israel, Houthis, Hamas, and my Twitch bans then? That is what is interesting about the process. Either the DHS is lying about the political motivations for Hassan Abi's detention, or asking citizens about their allegiance to Israel is now their standard practice. Exactly. Is this normal? Not even just like allegiance to Israel, but also opinions on Donald Trump, the president, or opinions on Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. That's crazy. That's not normal. The reason why this is insane is because you are asking an American citizen who is literally a part of global entry, that is a known traveler to the Department of Homeland Security, an American citizen that was born on U.S. soil, questions about whether or not they have an allegiance to Donald Trump, the current president. None of this will bar you entry into the country. Do you understand? And I don't even think that that was the purpose. I think that the purpose was to create a chilling effect. Mr. Piker described the conversation as really, really interesting and very cordial. He said the agent asked him what he did for work, the topics he talked about in his streams, and whether he discussed the news, including the war in Gaza and President Trump. They straight up...
I will say, I'll chime in here real quick. And what I find also very, very poignant is that his statement that he said that they can't ask you these kinds of questions. And even if they do, one, you don't have to answer them. And two, that's not a condition for detaining you from entering the country. The laws, the way that they are written and the way that they are to be upheld, cannot prohibit you as an American citizen from entering your own country. That almost, unless you are committing a crime, in other words, they find drugs on your person or in your belongings, then they have the reason to detain you because there is a crime being committed. But you merely coming in and they want to see your phone, as Hassan, I think, points out a little later here, that they wanted to see his phone, but he was smart enough that he disabled the biometrics on his phone. Now, by law, they cannot make you put in your passcode to get access to your phone. So if you have a phone, an iPhone, or that has biometrics, you want to make sure when you're traveling that you turn biometrics off on your phone. Now, Hassan did give me a pointer that I was not aware of, but evidently, if you forget to disable the biometrics while you're in flight and you're coming into your gate in the United States, if you hit the hold button on the side of your phone and press it 5 times in rapid succession, it actually disables all the biometrics and locks your phone. So that's something that I was unaware of. It's a great little tip to have in your head that if you forget to do it, although I'm of the opinion, and I think he says it a little bit from where we are now in the video, that I'm of the opinion that you should just take a burner phone. Just leave your phone at home. Let people know what your burner phone number will be while you're abroad, and just use a burner phone. That way, if they take it, no harm, no foul. Bye. It was a useless piece of shit anyway. So, I just used it for, quick communications, and I deleted everything. I wiped it before I came back into the country. That's another way to get around it. Just leave your phone at home. Don't take it with you. There are bigger laws that are around laptops because it's an older technology. So there are more protections of what they can and cannot do with regards to your laptop. But the phones it's much more nebulous. They can't make you put in your passcode to get entry. But if your biometrics, by just holding it up to your face or putting your thumb on it, they can get around that lock code because of the biometrics. This is a way to prohibit that from happening. Now, they can confiscate the phone and figure out a way to crack it. So there is that position. But best thing to do is back up your phone before you leave. If you don't want to buy a burner phone, back up your phone before you leave up into the cloud, and then wipe your phone, reset it to factory settings, delete everything that was on there that was on it before, and reset the phone and take it with you. And you can do it that way too. So that's another way to get around it. Also, I would be of the opinion that, be more protected and more guarded. You should anyways, of any and all social media posts. Child, don't give them more information than what they need. People don't need to know that you bought that new pair of sandals. Trust me, it's not a thing you need to put out there. So be much more judicious with your postings. and I know a lot of people are doing it anyways because they just don't want to do doom posting and doom scrolling. And I know people are trying to keep things much lighter than it is in modern society nowadays with social media. But you really, really need to kind of be very careful, especially in this environment with this administration. Be very, very cautious about what you post and why you're posting it. Now, as for me, I'm of a certain age now. I'm probably not going to go international traveling much. So, it's not a big deal for me. I'm going to be domestically bound anyway. So, I can move freely within the country. Domestically, it's not so much an issue, although I assume they could stop you if they really wanted to, if they had some reason. If you're making all kinds of threats to the current administration, I guess that could prompt it as well from even a domestic kind of flight. But anyways, let's get back to what Hassan has to say. But I just kind of wanted to raise that what he's the important point he's making there is that as a U.S. citizen, these questions and the answers you give, if you choose to answer them, do not in and of themselves have reason to bar you from entering your own country. So always keep that in mind. Know your rights. Get a one of those pamphlet U.S. Constitution things, and rather than just hold it and have it in your person, read the fucking thing. Learn what your country guarantees you so you know your rights if you're going into these kinds of situations. Don't just trust that you can look it up in the moment. They may have your phone and you won't be able to look it up in the moment. So if you're going to travel abroad, definitely do your research, get your ducks in order, and make sure those little fuzzy fuckers stay in line so that when you come back into the country, you have all your I's dotted and all your T's crossed. Okay? So let's get back to Hassan and see what else he has to say.
Try to get something out of me that I think they could use basically to detain me permanently, Mr. Piker said, using an expletive again. There's no direct connection or direct involvement. He also described the agent who identified himself as Iraqi as very sympathetic. Okay, they literally took very specific parts of this to make this seem like it was a pleasant experience overall. Okay, they omitted parts of this conversation that definitely maintained was not a pleasant experience. When he asked the agent why he was being detained, Mr. Piker said the agent told him it was routine. He also said he was repeatedly asked about his opinions on whether he was involved with Hamas, the Houthis, an Iranian-backed militant group that controls northern Yemen, and Hezbollah. Throughout the questioning, Mr. Piker said he was transparent in his responses and repeated the same answers, including describing himself as a pacifist who wanted the wars to end. In his broadcast, Mr. Piker said he planned to submit an online inquiry about why he was stopped. That's why I told you don't say cordial. That makes it sound like Ras Baraka. Yeah, but it's the truth. There's one citizen who has direct contact with Hamas, and through that, he facilitated the release of Eden Alexander. He's a pro-Trump Palestinian-American businessman who arranged the White House-Hamas direct negotiations. Yes, exactly. The Trump administration is in direct contact with Hamas. What are we talking about? The idea that, like, having a direct contact with Hamas, or having direct contact with the Houthis, or having direct contact with Hezbollah is not allowed in any way, shape, or form is, once again, an erosion of what previous considerations would immediately destroy as far as like a need for detention. Okay, we've already dropped that ball completely. It is ridiculous. The do you mean? Have you interviewed Hamas? I haven't, but I would like to in the future. What are you gonna do? Arrest me? What are you, crazy? That's insane. Like, that is actually insane, especially because, as I mentioned, this, like, Jeremy Scahill's interviews with the Ansar Allah movement played a formative role in the Trump administration coming to the table in Oman to cut a ceasefire arrangement with the Houthis. Okay, direct contact with membership, with direct contact with like the Politburo of Hamas, an essential part of the Eden Alexander release that took place. Yeah, and at no point did I say I was treated well. Okay, I said the agent was cordial, but the experience overall was designed to create a chilling effect on speech. I have mentioned this before, and I think that a lot of people don't understand this, but you absolutely are allowed right now under the First Amendment protections as a citizen or non-citizen to express support for Hamas. The idea that you cannot do that is ridiculous. You, in the United States of America, as long as you are on U.S. soil, are protected by the First Amendment. The idea that you cannot do that is new. That's new. And even then, I personally was managing the risk in my mind and did not take it to that step when I was having a conversation with the ICE guy, okay, with the agent. I don't even know if he's ICE, Customs and Border Patrol, or potentially HSI. A lot of people online just simply don't understand what the First Amendment looks like and what it's supposed to be used for. It's this. This is what it's supposed to be used for. It's a restriction on the government, okay? It's not a restriction on you. The First Amendment is not about private corporations refusing to ban you because you said slurs. It's this. This is literally what it's there for. This is the exact reason for why it exists, okay? It is not a restriction on the citizens. It is a restriction on the government from engaging in displays of power against the citizens. Even if our speech is about the support of designated terror groups and represent national security risks, this person responds to, he says, merely expressing support for a terrorist group is still protected speech. So yes, of course. You can say what you want in a free speech society. However, you are not free from the consequences when free speech threatens the basic rules of society. You certainly are free from government imposed consequences. Actually, that's the whole basis. You can't say you're not protected from the consequences. They're not doing a cancellation Twitter post, dumbass. They're trying to cancel your freedom. It is literally the basis for the First Amendment. And it's so crazy because these guys are so stupid. What does that mean? The First Amendment prohibits the government from punishing or retaliating against constitutionally protected speech it doesn't like. If the government is imposing adverse consequences because of protected speech, that is unconstitutional. Okay, sir. Someone comes in front of your house and exercises free speech right to say, I will burn your house. You're good? No problem. No, sir, you are not. I love that this guy is literally trying to debate a person who specializes in First Amendment litigation, okay? He is a First Amendment and defamation lawyer. The audacity. No, sir, you are not. No, why? Because that speech may have devastating consequences. So when a dude repeatedly and publicly states he supports a group calling for the death of America, there are consequences. If you cannot understand this, then you chose the wrong job. Except true threats are not protected speech. Saying I support Hamas is not a true threat.
Yep.
It is protected
that part
speech.
right
so
there.
No, the government can't punish it, even if you think it has devastating consequences. Thanks for playing how to have no idea what you're talking about. If I were you, I might consider that someone whose job this is might know more about it than you. But then I'm not a moron. I liked your last sentence. You are correct in that this is not a crime. However, said type of speech will likely warrant an investigation and questioning. Speech is used as a probable cause or an escalating factor for a motive in crime. Example, if you beat someone up at the bar, this is battery and assault. If you beat someone up at the bar while yelling racial slurs at him, the rhyme is elevated to a hate crime. Your words are used as evidence to understand the motive. Hassan publicly supports terrorists. They may just be words, but those words beg the question. Is he sending them money? A crime. Is he helping them organize? A crime. That's not what question begging is. If you beat someone up, you already have committed a crime.
Right.
What are you even trying to say? Cops can't just detain anyone they want because they said words of general support for someone else who committed a crime. It is kind of crazy that this, once again, goes along with the incredibly dumb thing that happens online all the time where it's like American exceptionalism, American individualism, and just like Dunning-Kruger causes people to just go, no, actually, you, the expert dedicating his life to this is actually wrong. I, random guy who doesn't like what this person is saying, will now sit here and act as though the First Amendment doesn't protect speech that I don't personally like. That's not how this works. This is also precisely the reason why.
This reminds me of that commercial, the insurance commercial. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this worked. The audacity of stupidity in these kinds of environment where, as he says, people who have dedicated their lives, who are true scholars of constitutional law and know this stuff, and then you have some rando that comes out and says, oh no, blah 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 blah. No, you dumb motherfucker. You're not even playing the same game. You're not even, you brought a piece of straw to a fucking gunfight. You're just so out of your league. Just shut the fuck up. And I like how Hassan nails it and says very clearly what's at issue here. And that the fact that these idiots come climbing out of the walls because they watched a video on YouTube, they think they are suddenly the experts. Now, how about leave it to the people who actually this is their entire life's work? I think I want to listen to what they have to say first before I start to reason it for myself. And that's the other part of it. A lot of people just give up automatically to someone who sounds authoritative on a subject rather than really listening to what they're saying. They either listen to it for the dog whistle and check words that you might have in your mind, your perception of a situation, as I spoke of before, your perception of a situation that you want to have it filtered through. And as soon as you hear those little bells going off, like, oh yeah, they said that word. Oh yeah, they said that word. Bing, 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 bing. That's my point of view. No, motherfucker. Listen to what's being said and then reason it out for yourself. Do more research, do deeper digging, find the root of what's being discussed and really look at it yourself. Don't just watch fucking YouTube videos. And I know that I get the irony of me being on a YouTube video saying this, but my point is you need to stretch your intellectual quotient far and wide. You need to actually look at things from many perspectives. I don't just consume, standard media for my news. I watch, news broadcasts from all around the world, especially when they're talking about America. Why? Because I have a vested interest in what they're thinking about us. So I'm not just going to take an American point of view about American topics. I actually want to hear what do the European Union have to say about it? What do the Brits have to say about it? What do the Danes have to say about it? What does Russia have to say about it? Ah, fuck Russia. But I have these kinds of opinions that I glean from around the world before I come to a decision of what I think is in play and what I think is happening. Too many people are stuck in their own fucking echo chamber, which is why, I love Hassan. I listen to him. There are many things I agree with him. There are many things I watch when I watch the Vosh Pit or watch Vosh directly. I love his work too. There are a lot of things we agree upon. I don't agree with everything. Part of it is I'm much older than these two guys. They still have idealistic goals and they have the idealistic dream. I have been beaten down by life. I am now in my sixth decade. I know how very little the needle moves on this stuff. We just recently had the ERA ratified, but it hasn't been certified by Congress. That started in the 70s. And here we are in 2025, and we just got it ratified. Okay? That's how slow this fucking shit moves. So while I admire Hassan and Vosh and all these youngsters out there, Adam Mockler and the rest of them with all their idealistic goals and stuff, and I say, yay, go you, go you, go you. This motherfucker, this bitch is too fucking old to have those idealistic goals. I'm much more pragmatic. So I call myself a pragmatic progressive because I pick and choose my battles of where I want to put all my energy and go all in on it. But I definitely cheer people like Hassan and the rest of the leftists, the Vanguard, those kind of things. Not TYT. TYT is a bunch of hogwash. I stopped watching their shrieky asses about 2 years ago. When they started going off on the trans shit, I just said, yeah, fuck y'all, I'm out of here. Don't give to TYT. I think John Iadarola needs to leave that fucking group. So does the Dr. Rashad. I can't remember his name now, but he needs to leave it too. They just all need to cut bait and just move on. I think they could establish their own communities. I think their followers will follow. I will follow John if he leaves TYT and moves away from all their bullshit, centrist and MAGA grifting that they're now involved in because there's more money in it for them. Ha ha ha. Who never thought that a leftist podcast who had to scrape and keep things going on their own suddenly decided that, oh, there's more money over there. If I start talking their talking points, I'll get some of the cash coming my way. Who would have thought that they would have sold out for it? I did. I knew that from the moment I heard them starting to get shrill and shrieky about everything. I'm like, this isn't fucking, left progressivism. We don't do this kind of stuff. I can see the passion that Hassan has when he talks about these things. I agree with him. I'm there with his passion on it. As being an older cat in the neighborhood, I don't have that much energy to put into every fight. So I'll let the young fight these. This is their turf now. They need to pick up the baton that our generation held and carried forward through the gay rights movement, through the AIDS crisis, through marriage equality. We've carried that baton. Now it's time for you all to run with it. And I think what they do is admirable and should be lauded. But I also think when they raise warning flags, bitches, we need to start paying attention to it. So definitely you should check out the rest of this video. I'm going to move on to the next thing I kind of want to cover. I've been watching a lot lately of the whole generational thing between Gen Z, Gen X, the boomers, Gen Alpha, all this stuff that's going, the millennials, and the kind of era, the late millennials, early Gen Zers, I'm most concerned with, primarily because my grandkids are in that scope, and I kind of want to keep an eye out for what's going on in their world. So as I say, I consume media broadly. I watch Black queer content that is made predominantly for Black audiences, because I grew up in and around the Black church. My parents sang in a very well respected and revered gospel choir back in the day. And so I was there for all of their joyous occasions and all of their sorrowful ones too. So I have a real connection with the Black community in that way. And so I consume their media because I have people in my sphere that come from that community, and I like to know what are their concerns, where are their positions. So I listen to a lot of podcasts that are the from the Black queer community for the Black queer community, and just because I want to know what they're up to, what's going on, what's shaking in their world, kind of thing. I also watch Dear Straight People, which is a gay Asian podcast, and I like to hear what they're going through, what their problems that they're being confronted with in both in Asia and around the world. I want to see what they're having going on. So I consume media broadly, is what I'm trying to say. I consume it wide. I want to know what all these voices, what all these people are going through, and how it filters into my own perceptions of how the world works, with my own experiences, with what's been going on. So I want to chime in just for a little bit on Emergency's take on the Gen Z split and how things are getting really bad for them. And like I said, because I have grandkids who are of that generation, so I kind of want to see what's going on for them. So let's chime in and see what we got here. Okay.
Dumb babies are different, okay? Dumb babies that went to high school during COVID, went to college during COVID, their full college experience during COVID, yeah, they are different.
I don't think Gen Z is more conservative. I think they're hopeless. I think they spend a majority of their educational career dodging bullets and having drills for a majority of politicians to reduce things down to a debate. There's no promise of buying a home. There's no promise of being financially secure ever.
We were told that we were a generation that was going to save us all as we were being lit the in schools. We're a generation that every time we come and talk about the realities of the world we live in, it's met with one of two. Either we're too young, haven't experienced enough life to know what we're talking about, or maybe we need to run for office. And then on top of that, when we have conversations about what needs to be done, nobody can agree.
There's been a divide brewing within Gen Z for almost half a decade now that's gone by largely undetected until now, where the differences could not be clearer. What I'm talking about here is the ideological and political split within our generation that has led to an alleged rise not only in asocial behaviors, but also in regressive and sometimes conservative ideologies and beliefs shared more closely to those in Gen X and Boomers rather than Millennials and the older half of Gen Z. Everyone's been talking about the rise of conservatism in Gen Z. I've made a video talking about the rise of conservatism in Gen Z, but now I don't think that it's completely fair to monolith Gen Z in this way, because the data shows that Gen Z does not think the same way, and in fact there is a more coherent split than we may have initially thought. And in this video we're going to try and get to the root of exactly why this is, where this split is coming from, where this ideological departure began, and to discuss whether or not it's still fair to look to younger generations, specifically Gen Z, as being the monolithic symbol for progress anymore. Because as far as I was told, we were supposed to be the future, and we're seeing how that's going. But before we get into all of that, if you are new to the channel, hello, my name is Rumi, nice to meet you. If you like content like this, be sure to hit the subscribe button because we're so
Definitely give him some love, guys.
And I'd love to have you here when we finally do. You can also show support by leaving a like on this video and follow me on my socials at Emergency on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, where I be posting about more lifestyle and other things that aren't as heavy and commentary based. But actually, while we're here and while we're talking about things that affect the lives of everyday people, your sleep, and more specifically, the quality of your sleep. And that's why I'm so happy to talk about this video's sponsor, Helix.
Yeah, we'll move right through that to where he's talking about
younger Gen Z. So you may be asking, Rumi, what's driving you to say that there is a divide in Gen Z right now? Well, let's look at the data. So what's going on with Gen Z right now? Like I said in the intro, there's been a lot of conversation online about Gen Z moving more and more to the right. And outside of exit polling from the 2024 election, most of this has been like pretty anecdotal. Like there hasn't been a ton of like true statistical research for this. So when we even talk,
I will say that what I've seen is that it tends to be split along the sexes, where the young men are becoming much more conservative and the women are much more liberal and progressive, and that's where the split is happening. Now, I'm sure that queer kids fall within that and are probably more progressive leaning, even if they are young and gay or bi or what have you. There will probably be more of a liberal leaning on those parts of it, but we'll see. Oh, that's a terrible picture I paused him on. Sorry about that. but definitely I think that's where he's going to go with this, because that's what I've seen in the latest breakout data on the Gen Z split politically. So let's see where he goes with it.
Talking about this, it's been more of like, yes, the amount of young people that voted for Trump in the 2024 election, but also just like the general sentiments with the rise of more conservative leaning trends, regressive ideologies making a return to the zeitgeist, and just the general vibes of it all. And I think that what's changed now is that we actually do have some statistical data here. It's not looking great. According to a new Yale Youth poll, which is a survey affiliated with the Yale Institution for Social and Political Studies, voters 18 to 21 have been revealed to lean Republican by 11.7 points when asked who they would support in the 2026 congressional elections, essentially meaning the midterm elections next year, which in and of itself is wild considering everything that we've seen happen over the past 4 months. But interestingly, voters aged 22 to 29 favored Democrats by 6.4 points, really showing a statistical split within Gen Z, or at least the adults of Gen Z. And I think that this split is really interesting and something that we should really talk about, because I don't think that these splits in age groups are just irrelevant. I do think that this age divide does tell a story based on the experiences of young people of Gen Z in these age brackets. And I think this is an important conversation because honestly, like up until last year, Gen Z has been seen in the media as like this overwhelmingly liberal, or at least more so progressive than previous generations generation that believes strongly in things like climate change, equality, human rights, bodily autonomy, and all these things, which has typically made Gen Z lean more heavily to the left. But as we've seen in our culture and in our polling, that is no longer necessarily the monolithic or one truth anymore for Gen Z. You can't solely count on the youth vote anymore because the youth vote is divided. And I really do think that this divide comes down to the difference in life experiences and just cultural experiences from the older and younger half of Gen Z. Now, before we hop in this conversation, let's define what we're talking about when I say older Gen Z and younger Gen Z. There was a really good opinion piece that was later turned into like TikToks, where someone coined the term Gen Z 1.0 and Gen Z 2.0, essentially distinguishing the two halves of Gen Z right now. Gen Z 1.0 being the older half of Gen Z. What the distinguishing factor between Gen Z 1.0 and Gen Z 2.0 is how old you were and what life stage you were at in 2020 when the pandemic hit. Well, Gen Z 1.0 being those that were able to experience graduating high school prior to or just at lockdown and up, and Gen Z 2.0 being those that went to high school during the lockdowns and missed out on the things like graduation, prom, or just generally had more of a hybrid school experience. And I think that it's really important that we talk about this academic situation and the impact of this one major life indicator on the entirety of Gen Z and how that's contributed to the split. We underplay a lot about, but one thing specifically is the impact that it had on education and how long-lasting those effects were and continue to be. We've spoken about the specific impacts of education in previous videos before, talking about things like how younger Gen Z and Gen Alpha are on a reading level and just generally struggle with things like literacy and are falling behind academically in the US, as well as talking about things like how dismantling the Department of Education and attacking education has been and will continue to impact the futures of Gen Alpha and Gen Beta. But just speaking in generalities, things don't look great. No. In 2022,
I will say, and I'll add here, that the Republicans have played a long game on this, in that they have worked really hard from the 1950s on. And my husband's father was a superintendent of schools in Ohio, and he remembers him coming home and having this conversation about how the Republicans were trying to dismantle education and dumbing down the populace. So this is a very long game that the Republicans have been playing, and the fact that they're now coming to fruition with the destruction and the dismantling of the Department of Education, it's only leaning more into this. And the reason why is they want the populace to be dumb, because then you can act like sheep and they can put the fear of God in you, which is exactly what their game plan is. And that's exactly what Project 2025 is. So you need to realize what he's talking about here has been in play since at least the 50s, if not before then. Probably just after World War II, this all started to cook. So realize we're now at the serving point where this is now being doled out and their goals are trying to be met. So when you're looking at the educational woes of Gen Z in the, as he says, the 1.0 versus the 2.0 before and after the pandemic, you do need to realize that a lot of the younger ones have gotten a much more subpar educational experience, and part of it is also the permissiveness of their parents who don't really hold them to getting better grades, to being focused, to staying on top of it. And, you can't necessarily blame the parents all the way around because, things are hard. They're trying to just keep a roof over their heads and food in their stomachs. So I get it. I get it from that perspective. But, my parents had to deal with that too. And they figured out how to keep us kids on track with our schoolwork. So, you know, I get it, but I don't. There's another part of it where I'm like, yeah, but my parents pulled it off and they were just as busy. We're the Gen Xers. We're the kids. We're the latchkey kids. Parents were hardly around because they were working. We had to, take care of ourselves in the afternoon after school until our parents got home at night and made dinner. So I come from that experience of we were much more, fancy free without having our parents over us all the time. We didn't have helicopter parents, so my parents still figured out how to keep us on track with our homework and stuff like that. So I don't necessarily give parents in this day and age that out, especially when there are so many more tools available to them to keep their kids on track. So that I think is a real issue for millennial parents and millennial parenting skills. Then I think it speaks to what to put the blame solely on the kids. I think there is a combo effect working out here, and I think one of the things that people don't realize is how long this game has been going on. Okay, get back to it.
26% of 8th graders were at or above proficient in math, much worse than before the pandemic, with that being around 33% in 2019. And it's not just math, it is across the board. You can look no further to TikTok to see teachers and educators alike sounding alarm bells to the state of education, how things just are so bad and so underfunded, and how schools now have essentially become forms of daycare because they have to pass the kids along every single year, despite whether or not they're actually passing their classes or not. So with the combination of education interruptions from the pandemic, the lack of resources given to students, teachers, and schools, and the lack of general care for one's schooling education, as well as political moves being made to dissuade people from getting higher levels of education, like with all the things going on with student loans being collected, it really sets the stage for what we're seeing and what we're going to see, with groups of people growing into adults in society without the same or similar level of education or experience, as seen in times past. And this isn't me saying like, oh, not being educated makes you automatically conservative. Like, no. What I'm trying to do is paint a picture for what the major differences are between the older and younger halves of Gen Z and what their experiences are like. Although I will say that looking at voting trends and demographics, with those without higher education or just general uneducated communities do tend to vote more conservatively, just looking at voting records. But I bring this up because just one, I think that it's genuinely concerning and will continue to make a clear disconnect from Gen Z just from the sake of quality of education for at least 10 years worth of students just not getting the education that they deserve or need. I'm not saying that the state of education prior to the pandemic was great either, like it was still trash, but it's the fact that it's worse than trash now is the problem. And this isn't even talking about Gen Alpha. Like the widespread lack of literacy, critical comprehension, and thinking that is generally taught in schools makes things like manipulation and mis and disinformation easier to spread and propagate because it's more likely to be taken at face value or immediately believed.
This is also why the Republicans are pushing for voucher programs with tax dollars so they can actually limit what is being taught and how it's being taught. So it's also part and parcel of the Republican game plan on the dismantling of the Department of Education. So what he's talking about here is actually a much bigger brush that they're painting with. And you need to be aware of just how pervasive and how pernicious this whole gambit has been up until now. So get back to what he's saying.
Without taking a critical lens to the things that you're hearing or consuming, or even when evidence points to the opposite. But this whole point isn't just to talk about like, oh wow, education sucks. It's more so to highlight that like younger Gen Z came into a system that really just was not secure or safe. Like the younger half of Gen Z experienced things like middle school, high school, and even college, where things were shown to not matter. Like having school be completely remote, like having classes and workloads that were either non-existent or a joke, or classes that were entirely too difficult despite everything else that was going on in the world showing that like this doesn't matter, leaves the impression that like, yeah, school doesn't really matter. School isn't something that's necessarily for one safe or sacred even when it is in person. And for a select group of people in that 18 to 22-year-old bracket, they didn't necessarily experience the same life events or see the same life events take place as those of us in the older half of Gen Z. Like think of—
I would also add that, we have had the lack of civics being taught in school. So the kids coming up don't really understand what their rights are. I remember being at a Pride festival, Pride parade in San Francisco with my queer granddaughter. And we were there having a good time. And at the time, this was while I believe Obama was still in office at the time. Um, and uh, yeah, it was this last year that he was in office. I remember that now. And we had the parade going by, and Nancy Pelosi, who comes from San Francisco, was in the parade, and she was one of the grand marshals. And she was going by, and there were three young queer kids around my granddaughter's age that were standing around us, and they're like, "Oh, who's she? Well, what is she doing?" And just the sheer audacity that they had no idea who this woman was. I had to stand there and explain to them that this woman was third in line to the presidency, something that they were not aware of. Now, I knew that from when I was in high school and had taken civics. So it really kind of demonstrated to me how little of life skills these kids are getting in this day and age. I think one of the things we should do is we should teach kids about taxes. We should teach them about the tax structure. You don't have to get into the deep dark weeds to, the moment they graduate high school they can go work for H&R Block. I'm not saying that, but they should know the basics. They should understand how to claim what they want on their W2s, so that way they know when their taxes are withheld, they're not going to be caught short and have to pay. They need to understand what exemptions are, how exemptions work. So there are things that we could be teaching these kids that are actual life lessons that can give them the ability to see down the road. I think one of the things we should teach children is and students in high school, especially in the high school years, we need to teach them about elder care, because what we need to do is give them the tools so they understand, yeah, you're young now and shit is working now, but give it 40 years, child. Give it 40 years and you're going to be breaking down all over the place. And you need to be aware of how this shit works and what's available to you now if you were that age, because then you'll make better choices. My husband, who played college ball and high school football, said he commented time and time again that if he could go back to his younger self, he would convince himself not to play football because he's paying for it now in his older age. And that's something that I think, while we promote a lot of sports in school, we aren't making really sound, good decisions for, the children that are playing it, and the injuries that they may sustain and be able to walk it off or heal from, but only then later in life to revisit those, because it was a weakened joint, it was a broken bone. So shit's going to start really being felt when you get up in age and your body starts to break down as you move slowly towards your death. So there are all these things that I think that we could teach in schools to give kids the tools that really benefit them. And I think that we do need an overhaul in the educational system. I think we need to find ways to teach coding. We need to find ways to teach, and I know some schools do offer these things, but I think we need to think about education in a different realm. I think I have seen things like in Estonia, the way that they teach their children, stellar. Absolutely brilliant the way that they're doing it. It's not so much about grades and progression, it's actually about collaboration and understanding and problem solving in a group format, learning from others, tips and tricks between you. So it's a much more collaborative kind of situation. My granddaughter actually went to a private school that was their whole realm of learning. There were no desks lined up in rows and everything being done by rote. You just memorize shit and regurgitate it back. Everything they did was on a discussion level. They had a huge round table that all the kids sat at, so nobody was at the head of the class. There was no front and back row. So the teacher sat at the table with everyone else on these huge conference tables in each one of the rooms, and the kids learned collaboratively. They discussed elements. They debated what was positive and what was negative about any given topic. And those are life skills that these kids can carry forward into their professional lives, because they've learned at an intrinsic level when they were young how to develop those skills. So one of the things that I think we need to look at from a educational standpoint is really breaking down everything. We need to remove textbooks being written in fucking Texas. I'm tired of that shit. Those morons don't know jack shit about anything. They'll write whatever the fuck they want about creationism and say that it's science. So we need to stop this whole bullshit of how textbooks are disseminated within the country. We need to actually start to build on the knowledge that we've amassed. We have enough knowledge in this world now that, we could rival the Library of Alexandria back from Alexander's days in the golden era, way back when. We have the ability to build those kinds of massive learning centers. We need to leverage all of that into our school system and give kids a much better foundation so that when they do hit the job market, these kids know exactly where their passions are. We play to their passions. We play to their goals of what they want to achieve in life. Be realistic with them and not give them just participation awards. I think that's bullshit. We need to go back to, if you excel, you get recognized for it. It then promotes you being much more involved in what you're doing. If you give up, then you have no one to blame but yourself, because the opportunities are there, the education and the training are there. It is up to you to excel and to get that recommendation, that adulation, that accreditation, whatever it is that it may be in whatever sphere you wanted to learn in. So I hear everything that's going on with what Emergency here is talking about, and I understand the split. I do know that it is a lot along gender lines, that predominantly it's not so much the Gen Z 1.0 versus 2.0. I think that plays a factor into it, and definitely the latter from the COVID pandemic on have gotten a poorer education, but also realize these kids have no discipline skills, none whatsoever. I have seen so many videos of teachers who are saying, look, I'm quitting the system because, one, I'm not paid for this headache. The situation that these kids are presenting in the classroom, they're unruly, they don't listen, they're not being attentive. There are not enough rules in the school to apply to actually keep the kids in a proper learning environment. So I think we need to reevaluate that. But I also looked at how Estonia did it. And if you really want an education on education, definitely take a look at Estonia and some of the Baltic countries, because they have some really world-class ideas on how to do education. One of the benefits that the Baltics, I think, went through was that when communism collapsed and they became independent, a lot of their youth, the Gen Xers of their era, when that regime collapsed in the Soviet Union, a lot of their youth stepped into the roles of government, because a lot of the people who were in government were all communists. And when they claimed their own independence, the youth stepped in and thought, okay, we have control of this stuff. What do we need to do to make it the best that we possibly can? And the way that Estonia has redeveloped their entire society, it is chef's kiss. These people really know what the fuck they're doing. And I think that we could take a page out of their book and look at how they've structured learning from preschool all the way up through high school, and how it's geared at learning what strengths each child has and crafting a journey for them to make a well functioning person in their modern society. But it plays to the strengths and the passions that the child has as they grow up and as their interests start to burgeon and how they start to blossom into certain things that actually will be of benefit to society at large. And I think Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania, they have a handle on this stuff. And the Finns and the Swedes and the Nords, they all of and the Danes, all of them in that kind of Scandinavian Baltic area, they really have a solid clue on how to do education. And I think we could take a big page out of it. And it's not like, not invented here, we don't want to hear about it. How many fucking Swedes do we have in the United States? How many fucking Norwegians do we have in the United States? How many fucking, Finns do we have? It's a melting pot here. There is no solid American idea. We all come from different cultures. All the cultures are here represented pretty much in the United States. So why not take a page from their book? Why not learn what they've done and take a step out of our playbook and think of it differently? Find a way to educate our children that actually play to their strengths, their passions, their burgeoning skills, their interests as they develop, and really hone their education for them to be very successful in life. I think that is something that we could and should do. And I know that AOC has talked about this at length, about the educational system. I know Katie Porter has. So this is something that the younger politicians are talking about, and I'm all for it. I'm all for it. But at the same time, like I said, I'm a pragmatic progressive. So I don't have the energy to be all in with everything. So I have to pick and choose my battles in the time that I have left on this planet. So one of the things I wanted to do is highlight some of the things I think are interesting that I want to talk about. So I'm going to stop it here. Definitely check out Emergencies. The Gen Z split is real and it's only getting worse. I will have links to all these videos that we're kind of previewing in the description below when this thing goes live for the rebroadcast. Let's move on to one by Chris Salisa. This is on Pete Buttigieg and whether or not he's going to run for 2028. I happen to like Pete. I think he is one of our best communicators. He, AOC, Katie Porter, some of the people that have really come up in the Democratic Party as of late, they're really good people. And I'm so on board with David Hogg. I think what they're trying to pull at the DNC is really fucked up and stupid. I think his call to say the do nothing Dems need to get out, and I agree with him. I think a lot of the older politicians need to leave. So let's see what Chris has to say about Pete possibly running again in 2028. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the next presidential election is going to play.
Pete Buttigieg is running for president in 2028. Now, he hasn't announced it yet, but trust me, he's running, and I'm going to tell you why I know he's running, and then I want to break down whether he can win or not, the pros and cons. So let's start with the why. So Pete Buttigieg, who you probably know, former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, ran for president in 2020, spent 4 years as Joe Biden's Secretary of Transportation, was in Cedar Rapids, Iowa earlier this week. Now, why would someone like a Pete Buttigieg just pop into Iowa to give a speech?
Absolutely.
Because he's running for president in 2028, and Iowa is very likely to have one of the earliest votes, as it often does. Remember, there are no coincidences in American politics.
That's right.
Pete Buttigieg didn't pick Iowa out of a hat to give a speech to a group largely filled with military veterans. Trust me on that one, folks.
Yep.
And in that speech that he gave to about 1,600 people in eastern Iowa, he said a couple things that I think are worth noting because I think it indicates the kind of campaign he's going to run and the message he's going to run on. He said, quote, "The American people bow to no king." Trust me, you're going to hear that line again, whether or not Donald Trump is on the ballot in 2028, which I don't think he will be, but the American people bow to no king. I think you're going to hear a fair amount of that. He also said that Democrats need to, quote, "talk about what we are determined to build, not just what we are trying to block." Again, you are going to hear that again, and I think that is a very smart message if you're Pete Buttigieg, because I do think, and I've talked about this before, I do think Democrats in 2016 and in 2024 made a huge mistake in that they basically made the entire campaign, well, you're not going to vote for Donald Trump, are you? Right? That was Hillary Clinton's message, and it was Kamala Harris's message too, really. And people did vote for Donald Trump. He's a two-term president now. So I like what we are determined to build, not just what we are trying to block. So yes, Democrats don't agree with Donald Trump's direction for the country, but also, yes, they have a positive, proactive vision for the country, and it is fill in the blank. Now, Buttigieg didn't really get into that, but I think that's rhetorically the right space to occupy. So, look, if you combine the trip to Cedar Rapids, the Going on the Flagrant podcast, sort of a podcast in the manosphere, which Democrats think they got beaten up in by Donald Trump in 2024. Pete Buttigieg announcing that he would not run for Senate from his new home state of Michigan. He and his husband moved to Michigan a few years ago. That he would not run for that open Senate seat. You add all those things up, and it seems pretty obvious to me that he's going to run for president in 2028. And honestly, and I'll get into this in a minute, I think he is a top-tier candidate, maybe one of the 3 or 4 people most likely to wind up as the Democratic nominee. But before I get into that, and I am going to do a full pros and cons list in this video of Pete Buttigieg as presidential candidate, I want to ask you for something. I want to ask you to become a subscriber to this channel. We have over 82,000 people who have signed up. I hope you will join our corporate profits. Second way I'm independent. I'm independent from the two parties.
Get that bag. Help him out when you can. But
than working for a big media company. So I hope you can support me again. Pros. He's really a naturally gifted political athlete. I would say Pete Buttigieg and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are the two most naturally gifted political athletes in the potential 2028 What do I mean by political athletes? I mean they do a lot of the things you need to do to run for office successfully, and they do them well and with relative ease. So Buttigieg is a really good debater. If you go back, watch some of the 2020 debates with a zillion Democratic primary candidates, I think he won every one of those debates. He's really good on his feet. And that goes into being a good debater, but he's good on his feet. He's good at taking questions. He's good at bantering with the media. He is a very bright guy, right? And that could be a con too, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but he's a very bright guy who sort of is, up to speed on lots of things, can speak intelligently and thoughtfully on lots of things.
He's also willing to go into the lion's den.
He was in his late 30s when he ran for president in 2020. And for a party that just nominated an 82-year-old guy and saw the perils of that and is now going through the situation caused, at least in part, by this book about Joe Biden and whether he should or should not have run, I think a young guy is going to be very appealing. Buttigieg has done it before, right? So he ran for president in 2020. He won the Iowa caucuses in 2020. He was one of the big stories of that race before the race got shut down because of COVID. So having done it before does matter. You know the things that you need to do better. You know the things that you already do well. Along those same lines, he's going to be able to raise a ton of money, and he's going to put good organizations in place in early states like Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. Again, that alone doesn't win you the nomination, but knowing that you can raise the tens, probably hundreds of millions you're going to need, and put a good organization of good campaign staff who know what they're doing in place in these early states and nationally, it does matter. Okay, the cons. Pete Buttigieg is gay. He is married to a man. They have kids. They live in Michigan. If you look at any poll when people are asked, would someone's sexuality influence how you vote for them, people will say no. They will say, of course, no problem voting for a gay man. Color me skeptical on that. Now, I don't know how big a chunk of people it will be who won't vote for Pete Buttigieg because he's gay in a primary or a general election, but there is a percentage. And I will say, even in a Democratic primary, there will be a percentage of people who, number one, won't vote for him because he's gay, and number two, won't vote for him because they are worried that him being gay could make him a less appealing general election nominee to people outside the Democratic base. Now, again, I don't know how big a percentage of people that is in the Democratic primary process or in the general election, but I know it's a non-zero percentage, and that.
I also have to chime in here, and I have to say, I'll counter what he's saying in that every year that passes, as we get closer to that election, realize how many older voters may not be with us anymore. And yes, we did just see in Emergencies video that the youth of Gen Z are a bit more conservative. I tend to think that, again, you're looking at the males, and Gen Z is a much smaller population. So I don't know that they would be the deciding factor in that kind of a situation. I also think that Pete is a much more known entity. He is willing to go into the lion's den, and by that I mean Fox News and some of the other dubious news outlets. He's not afraid to go in there and do battle, and he often cuts them off at the knees very quickly. And what they think is a winning argument turns out to be to their detriment. So he always brings his A game. He knows how to fight. He knows how to get in there. He knows how to hit them hard with facts. I'd say he's even better and more charismatic than even Gavin Newsom, who tends to be now on the side of like a used car salesman with a lot of the talking points. I really liked Gavin for a long time, but as of late, I've been really worried about the path he's taking at this point. He's giving way too many conservatives platforms to talk, and 90% of them are talking out their ass and are lying straight up. So yeah, I've had my problems with Gavin Newsom as of late. But I will say Pete Buttigieg also is more centrist, and despite what I said about the youth being much more progressive, and I'm leaving the progressive causes to them who can go all in because they've got the youth, they've got their exuberance, they've got the energy for it. What I will say to all of them is narrow your hopeful dreams a bit, because one thing I've learned in the 6 decades I've been on this planet is the big progressive seldom wins. You have to be more centrist, because it's not just the Democrats that you're worried about and the lay of the land amongst the Democrats. You've got independents. Now there are more of them that used to be Republicans who have left the Republican Party. They're not going to go for a major progressive. So really, you need to put your eggs and all of your chips in the basket with someone who is progressive in certain ways, but maybe more pragmatic and much more centrist in others. I think that is probably the best way to win. And I think Pete fills that gap very, very well. Um, I also think 4 years from now, with enough that we have knowing about Pete as he is now and him having been the Secretary of Transportation, I think he's been in on a lot of those international kind of conversations as well in the cabinet meetings and such. So I think he brings much more experience than he had before just as a mayor. So I definitely think that this is putting him in prime position to actually go for it. And sadly, I do think that people would vote for a gay white man before they'll vote for a black woman or a woman of color. Sadly, I think that's true. I voted for Kamala. I thought Kamala was the best choice. I still believe that she was the best choice. I think that there is some talk that she was railroaded in this whole scenario, how it played out. I kind of agreed to some extent. But be that as it may, I think Pete has a better chance. So I'm kind of curious where Chris is going to land on this. But let's get back to what he has to say.
Will be something Buttigieg will have to deal with. Number two, he is connected to an unpopular administration. Joe Biden left office not popular. Kamala Harris lost the presidency in 2024. Buttigieg was a prominent face and cabinet secretary in that administration. He's going to have to find a way to kind of separate himself from Joe Biden. I will say he was asked about Biden and whether Biden stayed in the race too long at this event in Iowa earlier this week, and he said maybe, and he added, in hindsight, I think most people would agree that's the case, meaning Biden stayed in the race too long. So he's starting to kind of move away from Biden. He's going to have to do more.
I don't think he'll have a problem with that, to be honest with you.
The transportation system in this country is not currently kicking ass. Obviously, we have Newark Airport. We've had the incidents with air traffic controllers at Reagan National Airport in D.C. Now, liberals will say, well, that's just Donald Trump and his administration. I'm not sure that you can get away with it that easily. Buttigieg was in charge of...
Yes, but let's qualify what he's about to go into. And this is often what I have a problem with Chris when he does these analyses, is that he tends to eschew certain scenarios, facts, and or considerations in his vein for his narrative. And I think what he's going to get into here is that, yes, well, but Buttigieg had control of it as he handed off to the Trump administration. That may be true. But how much was the Biden administration stymied by not only the Republicans in getting anything crafted and passed, but also Sinema and Manchin, who were the biggest thorns in the entire run of that administration. So they were hampered and handicapped by those scenarios. And I think Chris often overlooks these kinds of things. We'll see if he mentions it, but this is one of my complaints about Chris Celica and some of his positions on things.
He was the head of the Department of Transportation. So when we have big transportation infrastructure issues, I do think he's going to have to answer for some of those things in a Democratic primary. People are going to say, you were in charge of this. Why are these things happening? He'll blame Trump, but will that sell? And then the last thing, and I mentioned this earlier, and the last con is, I do think Buttigieg has a little bit of smartest guy in the room vibes to him. The kid who sits in the front of the class and is like, teacher, call on me. Or is like, teacher, you forgot to assign us homework over the weekend. Do you have any? Right? Do people want that in a president? Like, you want the president to be smart, right? But do people want it to be like the smartest kid in the class who knows the answer and tells everyone he knows the answer? I don't know. Right. I mean, I think that's a question that Buttigieg will.
Okay, but don't we have a president who's saying that right now, that he has all the answers? People went, see, this is what I'm talking about. Chris often makes these points and he has these counter arguments and these counter positions, but then you just kind of go, yeah, but we have somebody now who's saying that and we know he's an idiot. So where are you going with this? See, this is kind of why I wanted to watch this, because while I agree with him, I think Pete has a lot of this. I don't think the cons are quite the cons that he's playing out for.
they will have to find a way to address that, maybe not directly, but address it as he campaigns. But look, I think he is running. I think barring some major catastrophe, which, knock on wood, does not happen in his life, I think he is full speed ahead to the 2028 race. I think he is a major contender. I think his pros and his cons, as I've detailed, they are both there. But I always bet on good natural athletes in politics and in sports, and Buttigieg is a really good natural athlete who is.
Okay, so we got kind of where that's going. All right. Lastly, I'm going to hit up with Kyle Kalinske and his discussion on John Fetterman and the latest raft of reporting that's coming out of the fallout from his accident and also his stroke and all of the things that have kind of been covered up during this whole time and why he's been so erratic in some of his positions. So let's hear what Kyle has to say about some of this.
So as you all know, there was a big expose, I want to say it was in New York Magazine, about John Fetterman and just how horrible he's doing these days. So the bottom line is, Fetterman, after his stroke, he never fully recovered, right? He had the stroke. I'm sure you all remember the debate against Dr. Oz, where he really was kind of struggling to get full sentences out. But the funny thing is he ended up winning anyway because Oz just came across as really unlikable, and people felt like Fetterman is this big oaf who's likable. But ever since he got into office, he seriously has changed in some monumental ways. Fetterman is a guy who used to align himself with the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party. In fact, he endorsed Bernie Sanders during one of his presidential races. And he was supposed to be like sort of the next Bernie, but he gets in office, and then out of the blue, he starts acting like, honestly, I would say the next Joe Manchin, but he's worse than Joe Manchin. I would say the next Kyrsten Sinema, but he's worse than Kyrsten Sinema. Because you have all the same sort of like economic corruption that Sinema and Manchin have, but Fetterman spends all of his time cheerleading the Israeli genocide of innocent Palestinians. I mean, I'm not kidding. If you go to his Twitter feed, the majority of the stuff he says is like rah-rah Netanyahu, rah-rah war crimes. I've never seen anything like it. Now, what we learned in this piece is that, according to his staffers and everybody close to him, he literally is not the same guy. And so people were joking a while ago that it's the brain damage that he got from the stroke that made him more conservative. But every day, that honestly looks more likely. So, brain damage from a stroke, gotten more conservative. Now he always does the you gotta hand it to Trump bit. He always does the, but they're not wrong on immigration, bro. Meanwhile, he ran pro-immigration ads when he ran for office. So just a total 180 from this guy in every imaginable way. But the other thing is, he also is still dealing as well with just immense mental illness. Immense mental illness. If you look at a lot of the stuff that they reported in that piece, all of that is like classic bipolar 1 symptoms, mania symptoms, leaving in the middle of the day when he has responsibilities and driving all the way to Connecticut to see the grave of a friend he had in grade school or something, and his staffers being like, where the fuck is he? Like, what's going on here? He apparently would be incredibly impossible to deal with interpersonally, where he would berate people and he would say he's the world's foremost expert on Israel and Gaza. Again, this is all like straight out of the playbook. My grandma was bipolar. At the time, it was called manic depressive. And my mom was telling me her experiences because I was too young at the time when she was going through a manic phase. She was like, you don't understand. It's impossible to reason with a person like that because they really think they're like God's gift to this earth and everybody else is like a fucking peasant. And based off the reporting, that's exactly what's going on with him. So it becomes way more right-wing, way more Trump-supporting, way more incoherent, goes through these manic spells, yells at people, impossible to deal with. Apparently his wife was like begging the staffers, like, who keeps posting these Gaza tweets? These things are horrendous. These things are criminal. Like, are you guys feeding him this? And they're like, no, we're with you. We think this is crazy too. He's the one who's posted all of it. So it's just a wild story. It really shows you he's sort of like Dianne Feinstein. It was because of her advanced age that she's like sort of lost it all. But Fetterman is getting there, bro. Fetterman needs serious help. He needs to be medicated. He needs like a live-in nurse. Like, it's bad, bro. It's bad. So anyway, let me show you just how extra cooked he is today. This is in Politico. 2 more Fetterman aides leave embattled senator's office. The departures are the latest in a string of staff exits over the past year and a half. 2 more aides left John Fetterman's office in recent weeks, the latest in a stream of staff exits amid the Pennsylvania senator's shifting political persona and questions about his health. Fetterman aides Madeline Marr and Carolyn Schaefer parted ways with his team, according to 2 people familiar with their departures and granted anonymity to speak freely. They left shortly before the New York Magazine reported that current and former Fetterman staff were increasingly concerned about the Democratic senator's mental and physical health. Staff inside Fetterman's office had been bracing for the magazine story in the days before it was published. Fetterman has denied that he is not fit to serve, calling the report a one-source hit piece. That's just factually not true. A Fetterman spokesperson declined to comment, and Schaefer and Marr did not immediately respond to requests for comment. The 2 staffers had both worked for Fetterman's office since early 2023, according to the congressional data website Legistorm. The site listed them as legislative assistants. Fetterman's former chief of staff, top communication aides, and legislative director departed his office in the last year and a half. Bro, they're all getting off the sinking ship. What's so funny is you have all of these absolute idiots, leaders in the Democratic Party, like Chuck Schumer came out and said he's like a rising star or something like that, or he's a superstar. He said something like that. People like Bill Maher love Fetterman. And they act like, well, obviously that's the direction we should go in. He's like a disheveled white guy who looks working class and has extreme mental illness and became really conservative instantaneously. Okay. Meanwhile, not only are all of his staffers fleeing like rats on a ship, but wait for it, Fetterman is now underwater. 46-49 among Pittsburgh Democrats in internal polling.
That's
it's
not
a Chernobyl-style meltdown
That's not
among
good at all.
progressives, where he only has a 22% favorability rating. The idea that this guy was the future of the Democrats is honestly one of the dumbest things I've ever heard in all of my years covering politics. And I've been doing it.
Another reason why Schumer needs to leave.
Or another since 2008. You thought this guy was the future? Extreme mental illness, shifting right on a daily basis, cheerleading a genocide, scaring the people around him, people fleeing from his office because they can't.
You know, I'll jump in here real fast, and I'll probably wrap it up here because we're getting close to the 2-hour mark. But one of the things I want to comment here is that I'm of the opinion that we should have no career politicians, none at all. You get 2 terms, whether you're a senator or a House representative, and then you're out. Keep that door revolving. I don't think that the Supreme Court justices should be lifetime appointments. I think at most you get 18 years. Then you're out. We get somebody new in. Because I think this older person knows everything and they should be the ones to keep a steady hand. I don't think that that's necessarily a proven thing. Given how many bad decisions have been made by older politicians, I have a feeling that, my husband's going like this to me. Yeah, well, you're an exception and you're not a politician. So, but the thing is, a lot of these older politicians are not even playing the same game. Schumer's not playing the same game that Republicans are playing. It was evident when he had that ability to stymie that proposal that was going through the Senate, and he decided to cave and give into the budgetary kind of situation. So this man is just, no, you're done. You're done. You're cooked. You're overcooked. You're burning. Get the fuck out of the kitchen. I think that we need to get to that position and start having limitations. I mean, my husband brought up a point to me one time, sometime back when we first got together. He made a comment to me that back in the day, politicians were not in Washington all the time. They were there for 3 months out of the year, and then the rest they spent back in their districts, and they worked other jobs. They were only in Washington for a very limited time, which is why they got a lot of shit done during that period of time, because that's all they were relegated to. The fact that we have career politicians who sit in Washington and have all these lobbyists meet with them and such and so forth, no, we shouldn't have that. Lobbyists should be outlawed. They should be gotten rid of. We should not have any lobbyists. Allow to have people that are experts in their field to come in and have discussions, and I can assume you can say, well, those are lobbyists too, but we can set up a mechanism to have these people vetted so that they are truly the experts in their field, and they make themselves available for politicians to learn on particular subjects that may be something they want to craft a bill on, or a bill that they're opposed and they want some more clarification on their position and whether or not it holds water. I think we can do that kind of thing. I think we need to limit all politicians across the board in every state, in every federal, to 2-term limits, and that's it. You're out, get somebody else in there. Because I think we have a situation where these career politicians gum up the entire thing. And I think that is a real detriment to our country. I think Fetterman needs to go address his health issues, his mental health issues, and he needs to just leave. We need to get somebody else in there. Maybe Josh Shapiro will decide to move on to the Senate from his governorship. That would be a great choice. And I know he has aspirations to move into the federal level, so maybe that's a good way for him to go. There are other options, and I think that Fetterman, it's just an unfortunate situation where he came in as a strong progressive who had really great ideas. He had the stroke that did something chemically to his brain makeup. He has gone completely conservative in a very bizarre way, even for conservatives. This man is, hyping Netanyahu and the war crimes and all that stuff. He's lost his fucking crackers. I'm sorry. He doesn't have much to operate with up there, and I think a number of his staff members quitting is a real sign of problems in that office. And I think he needs to resign. I think he needs to step down, go seek the help that he desperately needs, and get better and work towards getting better. I'm more concerned with his health than I am for him staying in just as another Democratic vote. We can get somebody in there, Josh Shapiro, whether they appoint someone temporarily like we do here in California. I don't know if that's how Pennsylvania does it, but there are opportunities here to get another Democrat in that seat. So I think we need to really look at that and start making our game plan in that direction. It's unfortunate how it turned out for him, but that's how life is. Sometimes, we get the brass ring and then all hell breaks loose and we got it too late in life, or some other circumstance came in and made it not what we wanted. So, that's how life works, kids. We don't always get what we want, how we want it. So it's unfortunate, but I agree in that I think Fetterman is cooked. I think he's gone. He needs to go. He needs to seek the help that he needs. And I wish him all the best. And thank you for your service, but you need to go take care of you. And we need to get somebody back in there. And then I think as we work towards the midterms, and hopefully we can take the House, and if the Senate starts fucking up with this big beautiful bill that's actually the big disastrous bill that they're trying to push through for the budget with all the Medicaid cuts, if they push that through and it goes through, people are going to be royally fucking pissed, and I think we stand a chance to take the Senate back too. So we have a really strong candidate in Maine that looks like he may be able to unseat Collins finally. So, there's ways that we can play this that might change the dynamics of both parts of the Congress to actually be to our benefit. And then if that happens, we really need to press for the last 2 years to stymie everything that the Republicans have tried to do to tear apart this government. Because what they've tried to do is damage the government to a point where they can go, see, none of this works. Look how easy it was to break apart. So let's do it my way. No, ma'am. Nope. No, ma'am. We ain't playing that game. Not while I'm on watch. So this is something that I want to do going forward. I'll be here on Wednesdays and on Fridays at 6 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, or Pacific Standard Time when we get to that part, if we're still flipping the clock forward and back. But it'll be at 6 p.m. And then I'll be on for about a couple hours. I'll bring up some topics here. Hopefully I can get the chat situation. I don't know why the chat didn't work for this, but I'll figure it out. This is all brand new to me. So I'll figure it out, get it going, and we will try and have so you can leave a discussion. But at this point, just comment down below. Let me know what your thoughts are, and maybe I'll read them back on Friday's broadcast, and we can have the conversation that way until I can figure out what the hell I do in Meld to get this working. I'm not using OBS. I'm using the new software that everybody's raving about, giving it a go. But somehow I don't have something configured right to bring in the chat for either YouTube or Twitch where I'm broadcasting this. So there you go. So that's it for this time around. We're about 10 minutes away from the 2 hour mark. This is good enough for me for my first time broadcasting on Rope Podcast. Definitely keep an eye out for our ongoing conversations. One of the things I want to do is definitely highlight. Whoops, there we go. Let's do this right. I want to definitely highlight some things that I'm finding. There are a number of other commentators on the left that I want to highlight, things that they're talking about that I have a position on, and either I agree or may have some counterpoints to consider that I want to bring to your attention. I will be watching a lot of things on the queer front, obviously, because we're a queer podcast and we're a progressive podcast, a left-leaning podcast. As I said, I'm a pragmatic progressive, so I will cheer the kids out there who really want some progressive action, but I've been around long enough to know how little the needle moves. So, all power to them. I'll be your biggest cheerleader, but just know that I've got to be more selective with what I choose to go all in with. So, be that as it may, please like, subscribe, do all the things, help us out keeping the lights on, because there are costs involved with our continual building of this repository of queer content creators, our reactions, our reviews, and all of the things that we do here at Rope Podcast. It stands for Written on the Edge, and that's where we think our lives are lived, and the stories we have to tell are vastly important, especially in this climate and in this day and age. Our voices need to be recorded and kept and chronicled for posterity. And so we are endeavoring to do that. We are now in our 10th year of weekly broadcasts. So please take advantage of all of our older episodes. Now that I have the newer computer, I'm going to try and getting some of our archive stuff up from all the previous 6.5, 7 years that aren't on YouTube. They'll be audio only, but it's something that you can at least listen to pick up, and you don't have to go to the website and trace down or go to one of the other platforms. You can listen to it on YouTube as well. So I'm going to try and getting those kicked out. But there's a lot of them. Like I said, we're well over 700 episodes in. So anyways, all of that to say, like, subscribe, tell your friends what we're doing here. Help us out at ropepodcast.com. Go to patreon.com/ropepodcast or buymeacoffee.com/ropepodcast. Grab whatever change you find in the seat cushions and toss it our way by making a small one-time donation. Every little bit helps, and we humbly accept it and thank you for it. As I said, Vance and I do this as a labor of love for our community, and we want it to prosper. And we're not looking to get rich out of this whole thing, but we would like it to pay for itself. So anything you can do to help us out with that would be greatly appreciated. All right, that's it for this time around. I will catch up again with you guys at 6 p.m. on Friday, and let's see what I have on deck for that. If you have any suggestions, I'm open to them. Put them down in the comments of this video, and I'll take a look at what you're proposing. I take a look at and comment on. So that's another way that you can help out. All right, take care, everybody. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.